I'd like to talk about spirituality. Um, you might have heard people speak lately of mindfulness, and that's a state of attitude and being where you're cognizant of what's around you. You are aware of the passing of feelings through your mind. you see that in others. You try to be aware and responsive to your environment in that way.
Are you a spiritual person
then? Yes. The answer to that question actually is that we all are. We all have both aspects in our beings of spirituality or spiritual development and our physical self. Those come together. You could think of a person's life of the bookends of being born and dying. And during their lifetime, they have a certain amount of spiritual development, depending on the experiences they have and the things they understand and internalize. Of course, we all know that people don't usually remember their birth, but it points to some ideas. Quite possibly that memory is still resident, but not accessible. You can't quite get in touch with that time in your life, but it's definitely super important to you when let's say your body and your spirit emerged into the environment that we're now in. That's a beginning place. I haven't experienced death. I know I will. I've been around people when they died, my mother, for instance, and I was around when both of my children were born, my son and my daughter. Try to explain my spiritual development as a Christian. A lot of Christian folks put together a small tract, a little handout. They'll meet someone and offer them their Christian testimony tract. Tells their story. People can carry it with them and look it over and think about what the person has to say. I was hoping to do this in a medium where it could be distributed a lot more readily. Christianity is a very broad terminology. A Catholic is a Christian. A Copt in Egypt is a Christian. A Protestant is a Christian. All of these people honor and respect and give allegiance to Jesus Christ. They're Christians. I am a Baptist, which is neither Protestant nor Catholic. If you think of your spiritual landscape as the sum total and effect of the experiences you've had that are spiritual, a Christian will very likely tell you that they have had an experience, a spiritual experience with Jesus Christ, and that as a result of this experience, they have been renewed in a way where they have new motives, different expectations because of this. When I was 9 years old, a 9-year-old boy, I suddenly realized that I was outside the circle. I was in danger. I was looking into the void. I had sinful motives and I had sinful practices. When I talk about sin, I would be defining that as something that's against God's will, as we understand God's will and intentions. That was a very uncomfortable situation, and so I got some counseling and prayed to Jesus to please forgive me for being like that, and to be sure and include me in his eternity and reward in heaven. And that was a 9-year-old boy. Can you imagine how sinful he was? The way I became, my spiritual landscape of the discovery of that is vast. It's nationwide. It's so interesting to me personally, and actually doesn't really help a lot of people, I don't think, and so I don't share it much, but the details, the TikTok of it. But I turned my back on all that. I let the secular world talk me out of a lot of things I had come to believe. And I embraced the worldly life totally, everything you might want to think about. I definitely got involved and continued with it for a long time. It went on and went on, decades, and eventually I came to my senses. That may not be a good way to think about it. I came to my consciousness of what I was doing to myself and to other people, and became really convicted about that, and turned around in the other direction and looked to Jesus and prayed to him and began to express how sorry and stupid I felt for having been acting this way all this time. And yeah, he let me work through that and helped me with it, and gave me forgiveness. That encounter might not be what people ordinarily would think of as an encounter. It was an encounter that lasted many, many years. Both the before and the after was spread out in time, day after day, month after month, year after year. There was at one point when I was 25 when I decided I was going to kill myself. It was all just too tragic and too much turmoil, and I couldn't manage anything anymore, and so I was just going to kill myself. And drove my car into a bridge abutment at 80 miles an hour. And he spared me. I didn't die. In fact, I had to stand up and ask some people standing around there to get an ambulance for me, please. I think they thought I was dead. Got some pretty hefty slashes from going through that windshield. But I lived on, and that's an interesting thing that happened. For one thing, I have a really enhanced, shall we say, deeper understanding of who he is and what he can do for me or for anyone else. And I just want to honor that, be very respectful, and not ever do anything that would, take away from his status as who he is and what he can do. And I would like to be able to share that hope that I have with other people. Yeah, that's a good place to go, to think about Jesus. He came in a spiritual way and was born as a man. By intent, he laid aside incredible, unbelievable power and abilities and lived as a man perfectly under the law of the time, the Jewish law. The Jews were under the Roman Empire at the time, and they were looking They had a prophecy of a Messiah, but this guy couldn't be him. He's just too lowly. He's just a man of the people. He's a servant. He can't be it. I like to reflect on his humility and his service to people, his heart of compassion, and things like that. I like to pray to him. I think of him seated beside God, and there's more to the story that we understand will unfold.